Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Masculine and Mastery. I'm your host, Dr. Rasif. It's the show where we talk about things that matter to men. And today, all the way from The Hague in the Netherlands, we've got Barlas Günay, who is a certified psychotherapist, a qualified psychologist, who talks about and promotes a self-reparenting, inner healing, and trauma-focused CBT, and is the founder of Accept and Act all over social media. He's got his Patreon page as well, and does a lot of important work in the field of trauma-focused therapy. Barlas, good evening.
Good evening. It's so great to be here, Asif. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And it's actually quite nice. We're in a similar time zone because I've had a lot of guests from America, and they're like 5 hours behind. Yeah. So we are, although you guys are 1 hour ahead, it's a similar kind of time.
Exactly.
So, Barlas, how have you been? How's the last 2 years been for you? So in 2022, we're getting to the end of COVID now, officially. Yeah. How's the last 2 years been for you in your line of work?
Yeah. It's been busy, my friend. It's been really busy. So also personally for me too, I was looking forward always to start my social media, Accept and Act, on Instagram. And it just gave me the right time, the lockdown and everything in 2020, something I've been planning for years. And, through that, here we are together. You wouldn't know about me if I didn't start that Instagram. So it's been really busy, both like social media wise and also psychotherapy wise too, because there's a lot more people coming for therapy and a lot more people coming to do online psychotherapy. Before then, I was doing online psychotherapy anyways. I've been doing it since like 2016 or something like that, because back then I was living in Istanbul, Turkey, and I had clients just like I do now from the US, Canada, UK, whatever. So we were forced to do Skype sessions. So I was used to it. But then starting from 2020, March, April, I switched fully online. And because of my social media channels and because of, online meetings, video calls getting more and more popular, a lot more people started coming. And it's really busy now, but I'm balancing it, practice what you preach, right? So really trying to take some time off for myself and trying to have some, work-life boundaries as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because you said, I know you're a mindfulness teacher and a meditation teacher. And a big part of mindfulness is actually allowing yourself to be mindful. If you're constantly working, and as practitioners, we can sometimes have this savior complex where we just have to be on call 24/7. So it's absolutely important. Self-care is real healthcare. And I always say to my friends, I have a policy of turning my phone off from 8 p.m. till the next morning.
Nice.
And one day a week, my phone's completely off. Because they say you can't really pour from an empty cup. Your cup has to be full.
Yeah.
So I have a digital detox day. So, Barlas, it's very interesting because I've spoken to a lot of therapists, so psychotherapists, practitioners in the field of psychology. And they've said a very similar thing. It was very little online. COVID happened, they're massive. Probably did less than 10% online before COVID, and then COVID happened, almost 100% of consultations happened online. So this is a very, very similar story across the world. So in terms of Accept and Act, when did that come about? And if you don't mind explaining the name, like it's a really interesting name you've got.
Yeah. So I was taking a schema therapy course, which is like a deeper, more modern version of cognitive behavioral therapy that focuses more on the childhood experiences. It was also influenced by a lot of psychodynamic stuff. But anyways, I was taking that course And I was commuting from The Hague to Amsterdam. This is back in 2018, 2019. And, of course, I'm on my phone. It's like reading stuff. And on Instagram, I saw, all these psychologists coming up, starting with Dr. Nicole LePera, the holistic psychologist. She's the biggest now. I think she got like 5.7 million followers.
Her book is amazing. For me, amazing. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. So, I started seeing these posts and, all the other therapists like her, like really starting to come up, really starting to find their voice and, take the time to make these posts, make these videos and talk about this stuff. And it's so weird for us because, as a psychologist, all of your training is around, confidentiality and privacy. And, you got to keep to yourself, keep a low profile, don't share too much. It's all about the client. It's all about this, all about that. But, the more I trained, the more I did sessions, the more I gained experience. I just could not keep it inside. Like, I'm learning all these amazing things and I can only share them with one person at a time, during a session, face to face or whatever during the day. So I said, okay, I really need to get on the social media too, start sharing what I know, start helping people heal themselves for free. And Instagram was a great way of doing it. So I started in the middle of April 2020 after preparing for a couple of weeks, like just conceptualizing what I wanted to do. And then my own psychotherapy company, which is, what I market through Accept and Act basically. And I formed that back in November 2020. So that's how it started. And it's just been amazing. It's been an evolution of myself, of my business, and just understanding how to reach people, what people need, that's so important, and how to try to give them value, basically, because, anybody can Google, what is depression and what is anxiety and, what is cognitive behavioral therapy. But what I do is more focused on self-reparenting, inner child work, how to connect with yourself, how to process your childhood, how to confront the pain of your childhood, to be able to take care of your needs now and to learn from that. So, I have this kind of unique, different angle. And through that, I really try to reach more people because it resonates with people too. I understand there's a lot of talk about, what's happening in the here and now in mindfulness and, in a lot of therapies, but I think we don't address what happened to us as children too much and how that affected us. We downplay it a little bit, but I think there's so much power. It's so liberating and empowering to go back and to understand that the bad stuff that happened to you wasn't your fault. You were just a child, and what that bad stuff taught you. Because all of our experiences, they teach us something. If you treat me well, I will understand that I can trust people. If you don't treat me well, I will understand. I will interpret that as I can't trust people. So everything gets colored by those initial experiences in childhood. And then we never talk about it. And then, you turn 30, 35, 40, 50, 60, you go to therapy, or, you have problems. I'm addicted to porn. I'm addicted to eating Cheetos. I drink too much. All my relationships end in shambles. I've been depressed for 20 years. Nothing seems to work. La, 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 la. We never think about what happened between 0 and 10, 0 and 15, and what we actually learned from it. Because back then, we didn't have the tools, skills. We didn't have the power. We didn't have the self-awareness. We didn't have the abstract, complex thinking. So things just kept happening to us, and we just kept repressing and unconsciously interpreting them in these distorted ways. And now they show up in our relationships. They show up at work, whatever. And it's time to look back at the childhood and connect with it, make peace with it, so that we can move on with reparenting ourselves now.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredibly powerful. Lots of nuggets in there. And it takes me back to Noam Chomsky, the famous linguist. He talks about the first 7 years, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and how a child's brain, particularly the emotional centers, the amygdala, the hippocampus, what we call the subconscious mind, really starts to formulate, both physiologically and anatomically. It gets bigger as well. And how these foundational aspects of our formative years shape our relationships, shape our job prospects, shape our confidence, even Jordan Peterson talks about posture. They can even affect your posture. These things have a myriad ways of presenting. And a very good interview I listened to recently with Lewis House, based in the States. He's a podcaster who's got a show called The School of Greatness. And it's one of the most popular podcasts on Spotify. And he says, and I started doing this year, he says, have a picture of the young you on your phone and look at that every day.
Yeah, I saw that.
Reparent that child.
Yeah, you shared that.
And ever since I listened to that podcast, Barlas, I've had a picture of my phone, and I'm going to go through the stages. I'm going to have, this is a 7-year-old me, then a 10-year-old me, then a 13-year-old me, and I'm going to consciously reparent that child. Because the vast majority of us, through no fault of our own, had suboptimal parenting. Especially if you come from first, second generation immigrant families. You have the trauma of migration. A very good book called The Wretched of the Earth by Dr. Franz Fanon. He talked about the trauma of migration, how children of diaspora have untold trauma, which is not addressed by their parents, because in ethnic communities, complex PTSD is a taboo. It's not even addressed. And what you mentioned there, these subconscious processes which then affect our relationships, that for me is complex PTSD in a nutshell. A really good book called, I think, Healing Your Inner Tiger or something like that. It's got a tiger in the name. It's about
Awakening the Tiger. Awakening the Tiger, I think.
That's the one, Awakening the Tiger. Meant to be very powerful. Can you explain, Barlas, what is complex PTSD in the context of adult behaviors?
Absolutely. I would love to. So first I'll go back to the childhood, and there's a lot of neuroscience research, and I'm sure you've read about this stuff too. We will never have as many connections as we have in our brains between the ages of 4 and 7. There are so many connections, but then depending on our environment, depending on what we are exposed to, some of these connections get turned off, some of these connections get stronger. And they call this pruning. In neuroscience, that's called pruning. There's so many connections in a child's brain, but of course, not all of them are going to be used. But the way we are created is that you're ready for whatever. Your life is ready to go to wherever, based on the language and your socialization. And then some things get some things are discarded, some connections are kept. That's why we're always going on about 0 to 7, 0 to 7, 0 to 7, your childhood, your parenting, la, 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 la. It's based in science. It's not something that I came up with. It's based on neuroscience. You have the most connections. Therefore, you are most vulnerable to your programming, to trauma, to abuse, to neglect. But also, you will benefit the most from good parenting and happiness and resources and things like that. So that's number one. That's why it's so important. Number two, complex PTSD. Well, this is not in the DSM yet, unfortunately. The Diagnostic Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, even though we have the 5th version of it now, which was released in May 2013, and then it was updated recently. It's not there yet. You got PTSD. PTSD is more about one single event, like, I don't know, you have a car accident and then you have post-traumatic symptoms around that. Every time you get into a car, you start to hyperventilate, you get scared, you get worried, because what if we have an accident again? Complex PTSD is traumatizing stuff happening to you over a very long period of time. So as you said, complex PTSD, CPTSD, that can come from having parents who didn't take care of you properly, having parents who were abusive, neglectful, traumatizing, because a lot of the things will be repeated, So for example, if you're getting verbally abused, that's not going to happen once throughout your whole childhood, because the person who's verbally abusing you, let's say it's your mom, she's not going to do it once. If that's the pattern, she's going to do it many, many times. So you get complex traumatization of the child. And then when you grow up, just like the single trauma person who's afraid of the car accident, you're going to be afraid of relationships. You're going to get tensed up in relationships. Am I going to be criticized? Am I going to be judged? Is this person going to verbally abuse me? Are they going to tell me that I'm not good enough? And then because you're so afraid of it, because you are on the defense of it, and you can't control this because it's like a post-traumatic response, which is your nervous system, your body trying to protect itself by anticipating different triggers, then you're going to end up getting into these self-fulfilling prophecies where you enter these relationships really defensively, really harshly or whatever. And then guess what? What you're afraid of happens. You get criticized, you get rejected, you get abandoned. And that's also another part of complex PTSD. It self-perpetuates until we become self-aware and until we start doing the work of nervous system regulation, teaching ourselves, teaching our nervous systems, teaching our bodies to get out of the survival mode: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. There are 4 different survival modes. You'll be going into one of these 4 based on your childhood experiences. It's very complex, CPTSD. Just recognizing this is not real. This is my childhood trauma. Holy crap, and then soothing yourself, taking your nervous system out of that, showing your body, showing your nervous system that it's overreacting, that it's a false alarm, that the coast is clear. You can chill out. We're not getting attacked. We're not getting abused. Nothing horrible is happening. It's just an argument with my girlfriend or whatever. We're not in life danger. There's no threat. Teaching that to yourself. So I would say, self-awareness and nervous system regulation. And you were asking earlier, how did you come up with accept and act? That's how I came up with it. Acceptance is the acknowledgement, realization, and acceptance of your problems, of, good or bad, of your reality, basically, your experience, unconditional, radical acceptance of whatever is happening to you. And then through that acceptance, taking actions to take care of yourself, to change yourself, to change your future, to heal yourself. And that's how we deal with complex PTSD too. We accept it. We say, XYZ went wrong in my childhood, and this is why I act this way. And then we take it to the next level. Okay, but now as an adult, I have the power, I have the resources, I have the choice to take care of myself, to change myself, to try to heal myself.
Yeah, I think that's, again, very powerful, because the concept of radical self-acceptance, accepting the past, and not approving of it or agreeing with it, but accepting it. And I think this is a nuance here. People think that accepting it means you agree with it or approve of it. Not at all. And you put up a really good post yesterday, and it really resonated with me, or maybe on Saturday or 2 days ago, about anger. Anger is legitimate. Yeah. Having anger towards your parents is absolutely, legitimate. We almost gaslight our own lived experience. Say, no, it's fine. The parents didn't know better. Yeah. But that, I think that's quite damaging. Actually, they could have known better. They could have done better. And this cultural perpetuation, because I don't understand why you would want the same for your children that happened to you.
Exactly.
So if you got abused, you wouldn't want your children to be abused by yourself. You want to break away from the shackles, and that requires a certain level of self-awareness. And I think a big part of, certainly in my coaching, what I've realized is going back to Dr. Chomsky's NLP. The first 7 years, if the child was emotionally neglected, what we call childhood emotional neglect, CEN, by emotionally unavailable parents, they then grow up being emotionally illiterate. And like you said, in relationships, they have this negative self-perception and very
Yeah,
low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And when they get into a disagreement with a partner, it then translates as disrespect. They shut down or they get angry or fight or flight. They can't regulate their emotions. And he or she could be a 30, 40-year-old woman or man, but they're still behaving like a child because that inner child has not been reparented.
Yeah.
So you talk about reparenting, Barlas. Can someone do that completely online without any need for a therapist? Or does it have to be some guided sessions?
I think we need to use everything that's available to us. If the only thing that's available to you is internet, like podcasts, YouTube videos, online courses, my Instagram account, whatever, use them. But at some point, you do need a good therapist to come in and mirror that good enough parent that you never had. Someone who listens to you and doesn't judge, doesn't budge. They just listen to you. Whatever you say, even if you say the scariest thing or the most uncomfortable thing, they listen to it. They say, okay, they normalize, they validate, and then they help you process that emotion. They help you digest that difficult, uncomfortable emotion. And through that, we call that co-regulation, and through that, you learn to regulate yourself. So it's like having the good enough parent that you never had as a child, having it now in the form of this therapist or in this like therapy frame as an adult. That being said, you can definitely improve significantly without a therapist too, if you do the right work, which is self-awareness, nervous system regulation, and self-reparenting. And also, what you were saying is so interesting and it's so true. We grow up, but I think most people just grow old, because emotionally and in terms of our emotion regulation skills, in terms of our nervous system flexibility, our nervous system strength, if you will, we stay pretty small. Why? Because we're not modeled properly how to regulate our emotions, how to take care of ourselves, how to allow our difficult emotions to come into our consciousness and then try to do something with them. Because our parents, maybe they didn't have time, maybe they were not around, maybe they had their own psychological issues. So when we had these big feelings, when we had these difficult emotions, it was just too much for them. And they either got ignored. So that's a missed opportunity for a parent. If your child is having a tantrum, if they're very angry, if they're very sad, that's great. That's an opportunity for you to show them self-regulation. That's an opportunity for you to teach them nervous system regulation. You show up for them, you hug them, you say, oh my God, baby, this sounds really difficult, no matter what it is, no matter how small you think it is as an adult. That must be really horrible for you, baby. I'm so sorry. What can we do? Just like really being there, really allowing that emotion, whatever it is. And when you do that, the child learns, oh, I'm not crazy, I'm not too much. I'm not weird. I'm not strange. So my emotions are okay. They're valid. They're normal. I am allowed to feel angry. I'm allowed to feel very anxious. I'm allowed to feel very sad. That's interesting. Okay. So through this, I can feel these emotions and then I can take care of myself. What was it that my mommy did? What was it that my daddy did for me? Oh, they asked me about my emotions. Okay, I can ask myself about my emotions. And then they helped me get out of those moods. They distracted me from those moods by doing something fun or interesting. Like, they took me out to eat some ice cream. They took me out for a walk. They played with me a little bit with my little toys and my Legos. Okay, I can do these things now too for myself as an adult. I can take a walk. I can go wash my face. I can go call a friend when I feel bad. I can take some deep breaths and really allow that emotion to pass through me. That's what we learn as children. That's the most important skill in the world. An adult who's able to regulate their nervous system, an adult who's able to regulate their emotions. Once you're able to do that, the sky is the limit, because on top of that, then you can build whatever relationship or whatever goal that you want to build. But without that, you will always be weighed down by the difficulties in the emotion regulation, for sure.
You get hijacked. So
Exactly.
Dr. Steve Peters talks about emotional hijacking of the amygdala. So the chimp brain. And interesting study done on pilots saying that if a pilot flusters, gets emotionally hijacked, his or her IQ drops to 10%. Some say 3%, others say 10%.
Yeah.
So you could be an average IQ pilot, and you could still perform better than an extremely high IQ pilot, provided you emotionally regulate. And I've always said to my clients with coaching, EQ determines your life trajectory more than your IQ. Daniel Goleman talks about emotional intelligence. Great book in 1995. Your EQ really does determine your life's outcome. And in Islam, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the strong person is not the one who can wrestle people. It's the person who can regulate their emotion during bouts of anger. That is a strong person. And, that is so important. We've seen people lose their temper. We've seen people have impulse control and, whether that's sexual or whatever that may be. The ability to have metacognition, just bring yourself away from your brain and say, look, I'm going after this dopamine rush, whether it's sexual or sugar or whatever the dopamine rush might be. This is my inner child seeking some sort of validation. And it's a very good point you made there about recognizing, with a child, recognizing, validating. That's a core part of a book called The Whole Brain Child, written a few years ago. The Whole Brain Child talks about holistic parenting of children and how to develop children who are well-rounded. And a big part of that is validating, not distracting or say, forget about that or minimizing. Never minimize. Always validate and legitimize and explain and rationalize. Never ever minimize. So, you're overreacting, because that then decreases the window of tolerance, the tolerance window. And I think this is a really important point you're making, Barlas, about emotional regulation. The person who has emotional regulation will always go ahead in life, whether that's in sports or any other industry. They will always go ahead in life than someone who's more talented but can't regulate their emotion.
Yeah, it's the real wealth,
EQ is absolutely, that is the currency in today's, especially in today's economy, where attention is the real money. So, in terms of emotional regulation, what kind of, apart from mindfulness, meditation, kind of vagal stimulation, where people are, diaphragmatic breathing, they can bring their heart rate down, they can increase their lung capacity. What other practical advice can you give for people to really not allow themselves to be hijacked emotionally in adult life?
So we will all get hijacked a little bit. We will all get triggered from time to time, and that's fine. But also, I think it's more important to learn how to come out of it, as you said. Because if I go out into the world expecting and demanding from myself or from the world or from others that nothing should upset me or I should never get triggered, that's pretty hard on yourself, and you're not going to succeed. So all these good things that you said, the most important method of building up the nervous system, making it more flexible, making it stronger, is mind-body work, which is a collection of different mental and physical exercises. The most typical ones, as you also addressed: yoga, meditation, mindfulness, vagus nerve stimulation, breath work, breathing exercises, diaphragm breathing, cold exposure. It really works. It really gets you out of the survival mode. These things, also mindful movement. You don't have to follow like a a yoga program or something like that, just taking every morning 5-10 minutes and trying to move in a way that feels comfortable and relaxing to you. You can stretch, you can climb stairs, whatever. So these things really help. I think we all need to establish some kind of a mind-body work practice. And the way I do it, after so many years of studying this and doing this, is something very simple. Do not try to do anything too long or too complicated, because you will not make it into a routine. A lot of people come to me and they say, I've been meditating for 2 hours every day. And I tell them, why? Like, that's too much work. I've never done that. If they want to do it, that's great, but it's not necessary to retrain the nervous system. Here's what I do. I alternate between 1 day of some kind of meditation / breathing exercise and 1 day of some kind of physical exercise. So, for example, today I do 3 minutes, I'm serious, or 5 minutes of just closing my eyes, focusing on my breathing, in through the nose, hold for a couple of seconds, out through the mouth, just trying to pay attention to that, sitting down or lying down. It's like a 3-5 minute breathing meditation, awareness meditation, body scan, awareness of the breath and the body, whatever. It's all for free, all over the internet, on YouTube. You can Google that, find something really short and easy. And then the next day doing a very simple, very short stretching routine, a very simple, very short beginner's yoga routine. Or, as I said, just finding some kind of movement that feels really happy and relaxing for yourself. So this is like a little mind-body work practice that I follow. Something like this could work for you too. But also, it's all about trying different things and then picking and choosing what works the best for you. So, for example, on this journey, what can be really helpful for a lot of people is to, take a yoga class, see how it feels. Do you like it? Great. Put a little bit of it into your life. You don't like it? Move on. Find something else. Take a meditation class. Take a mindfulness class. Pick and choose. Look at stuff on the internet. Try to learn from other people. And over time, it's all about establishing your own mind-body work practice. Beyond that, beyond all of this stuff that is often talked about on Instagram, another thing that really, really, really helps is just learning to accept the emotions as they come. Just allowing, this is more like a internal process, this is not something, you do with your body or something. When you feel something, show up for it, lean into it, just try to be there for it, turn towards it. Don't run away from it. Even if you're feeling something really horrible, even if you're feeling something that feels really uncomfortable, just try to bring some kind of curiosity to it. It's like, let's say that you're feeling really angry. Wow, I'm noticing right now that I'm feeling really angry. Interesting. I'm feeling this anger in my body. I feel this anger in my thoughts. Wow, what is this? It's this energy. Where is it coming from? What happened to me? So bringing that curiosity, just like a good enough parent would have for their child. When your child is having a tantrum, when your child is too angry, too sad, too anxious, whatever, you don't abandon them. You don't walk away from them. You go to them, you show up for them, you hold them, and you say, wow, baby, you're really angry. What's going on? I can see you are really stressed out. What's going on? So doing the same thing for yourself. I can see that I'm really angry. What's going on? Wow, that's a lot of that's a big reaction. What's happening here, baby? What's going on? Same thing. Internalizing that good enough parent and approaching the emotions with that good, wise parent, loving parent, showing up, validating, normalizing, and then you can move on. Whatever you want to do. You can meditate, you can take a walk, call a friend. Yeah.
It's a really poignant analogy there. And someone told me once, it's like clouds, the sky is blue and then a cloud comes, that's a thought, a black cloud, a white cloud, bad, good thoughts come. And it's about seeing them, understanding the nature of the cloud, and they will pass as well, but actually not minimizing it and not dismissing it, saying it's not there. Actually understand where this cloud emanated from and what you can do about it. You mentioned right at the beginning an interesting the 4F response. When I was at medical school a few years ago, we only ever learnt about fight, flight, and freeze. Yeah. And since I've been doing my coaching, I've come across fawn. Yeah. And Dr. Nicole Pereira talks about it a lot on her feed, fawning. I read a lot about it, and it's certainly something a lot of my clients have come to me with. Now, can you explain fawning to the audience who might not necessarily be familiar with it?
Yeah. So fawning is a trauma response that includes complying, submitting to be able to survive. So, as you said, it's one of the four survival responses. Fight, very obvious. You feel threatened and you fight back. But, it's very broad. For example, writing an angry comment on somebody's social media page, that can also be like you in your fight response. It doesn't have to be like a physical fight. Run away, there's flight. That can be, literally running away, like an animal in danger, or it can be just disappearing, ghosting people, not answering. So they show up in these symbolic ways too, like within relationships. It's not just this like physical thing that we do with our bodies, like animals. And freeze is just, not playing dead. Basically, that's where it comes from in the animal kingdom. If I play dead, maybe the predator will go away, and sometimes they do. It works. So that would be like really going into this, like really deep depression, and you cannot move. You have no motivation. You don't want to do anything because you are so scared. So, that could be like a good example of freeze. Or just, for example, you've been traumatized by relationships. So as a trauma response, you freeze and you don't allow anybody into your life. That's also like a freeze response. It's hard to see these things. And fawning could be something like people-pleasing, self-sacrifice, self-betrayal, perfectionism in your relationships, trying to fix people, trying to really change people in your relationships. That can be like a fawn response. Why? Because, I'm scared that something bad will happen, or I feel threatened. I feel triggered. I feel like the other person is going to leave me, or, they're going to do something that's going to cause me some kind of pain. So I am going to do whatever they say, or I am going to try to please them so that they don't put that hurt on me. And, people pleasing. People get into really toxic relationships. They get verbally abused. They get physically abused. But when you ask them, it's like, okay, why don't you break up with them? They say, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Your feelings and your body is getting hurt every day. It's a fawn response. It's from their childhood. They have been in a situation over and over and over again as a child, as a teenager, where they couldn't escape, they couldn't fight back, they couldn't set boundaries, they couldn't make the hurt stop, they couldn't make the pain stop. And they had to, as a child, continue to live in that family, continue to live in that house, because what are you going to do as a 5-year-old who's getting abused? Like, you can't get up one day and say, you guys are horrible parents, I'm out of here. You can't do that. So you have to find a way to, okay, I'm getting abused because I am too active as a child. You know what? To be able to avoid this, I'm just going to be a more passive child. I'm just going to shut up and do as I'm told. I'm going to become a people pleaser. I'm going to become a parent pleaser. I'm going to do exactly as my parents say. You're fawning. You're in this like fawning response. You're not expressing your needs. You're not setting your boundaries properly. You are all about avoiding that hurt, real or imagined, through submitting, people pleasing, self-sacrificing, putting your needs in the second place. And, that's where it comes from. And I'm so glad, because as you said, normally it's not something that is taught, like not only in medical school, but even in clinical psychology programs. It's fight, flight, freeze. That's it. There's fawn too. And, that's really coming from Dr. Peter Levine and Stephen Porges's work with the trauma and how it shows up in animals, and the comparison to how it shows up in humans. That book, as you said, Awakening the Tiger, from 1997, I think. It started this whole thing partially. So, yeah, very interesting stuff. We're learning more about it.
No, it's really weird. As a qualified doctor, I had never come across this term until after medical school. My brother's doing a PhD. He had never heard of this term up until August when I mentioned it to him.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because this manifests in relationships. People often self-sabotage, people please, and that opens up the doors for abuse. Now, I talk a lot about abuse in relationships, both men and women. And it opens up the doors for abuse, like we as therapists and practitioners want there to be toxic-free, healthy relationships that not only survive but thrive. And a big way to do that is to stop phoning. And now, in terms of tips, I've seen your page. You mentioned setting boundaries, transparency, open communication. What do you think are the kind of top practical tips you can give someone? Because it's good to say setting boundaries, but what do you mean by that? Is that setting boundaries like I can't go out tonight, or I'm going to bed by 10 p.m.? What do you mean by boundaries?
Exactly. It's very, there's a shortcut to understanding the boundaries. Just tuning in with your needs. What's okay with you? What's not okay with you? What do you need to happen? And what do you need to not happen? So, for example, if, I don't know, like if your boss is telling you, you can't leave tonight, you can't leave at 5, you got to stay until 9 and finish this thing. First, you need to be able to notice the discomfort that this is creating. And you won't be able to do that until, you allow the full spectrum of your emotions to come, so that's where emotion regulation, mindfulness, and self-awareness comes into play too. All of this comes full circle, like you can't set boundaries if you don't have nervous system regulation skills. You can't have nervous system regulation skills if you don't have self-awareness. Like it's all this like big holistic cycle. Now, you look at your needs, you look at what's happening in your body when he says or she says, you can't leave. You got to work for 4 more hours. Something's got to be happening in your body. Something is happening in your body, in your mind. Maybe you're getting a little bit tense. Maybe you're getting negative thoughts. Maybe you're getting scared. Maybe you're getting angry. It's triggering something. And then that trigger is making you go into that survival response, which is, you can go into fight and you can yell at him. You're like, screw you. I'm not doing anything. You can run away. You can say, okay, I'll be right back. And then you can leave the office. You can freeze. You can say, okay, whatever. Or you can be like, oh yeah, of course I will work. It's really important for our company to grow. And sure, yeah, I'm a great worker. You're sacrificing yourself. You are abandoning yourself because your true authentic need is to say no. You felt some kind of weirdness in your body. Something was off, even if you can't name it. So you have to follow that feeling. You have to follow that need, because behind every emotion, there's a need. If I'm feeling angry, that means I have a need to defend myself. If I'm feeling anxious, that means I have a need for some certainty, safety. So it's the same thing. Tune into your emotions. Through that, tune into your needs. And then when you find your needs, really practice saying no, basically. Even if it makes you feel scared, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, even if it makes you feel guilty, start really small and just practice saying no. And that's how you get out of the fawn response while you are retraining the nervous system and all those things we talked about.
Yeah. It's the whole process, psychosomatic desensitization. It's the whole process, spectrum, like you said. It's a lifelong journey, just like physical fitness.
Amen.
You don't ever achieve physical perfection. Even the world's best athletes are training all the time. And I read somewhere recently that no is a complete answer. If someone says, "Do you want to go out tonight?" No. In the phone response, people have a tendency to over-explain. No, I'm sorry, blah, 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 I'll make it up for you.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, in the moment they feel good because they're self-aware of the other person as opposed to themselves. They become inauthentic to themselves.
Yeah.
And then that leads to resentment. So it's better to have that momentary discomfort at the beginning by saying no than having that, long-term resentment for saying yes, but not really wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's why setting boundaries is so important. In terms of the other flight response, flight and fight, we see a lot of this emotional hijacking. And I always say it's a process from self-awareness leads to emotional literacy. Emotional literacy then leads to emotional regulation. That kind of EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence comes from emotional literacy. And I say to my clients, when I ask them how they're feeling, they either say good or bad. So some of them are quite young, they're teenagers. And I always say to them, look, the more you know about the English language, the more literate you are, the more words you know, the more you read. Reading, they say readers are leaders. So the more you read, the more words you know, the more you can become nuanced in your vocabulary. So instead of saying, instead of describing something as big or small, you can be a bit more, let's say, effusive with your description.
Yeah.
And that same linguistic vocabulary, that range, vocal range, can then be applied to emotions. Because instead of just anger, I fight, or flight or freeze or fawn, you've got much more to play with. And it goes back to that psychosomatic desensitization. So in terms of, you mentioned cold there, and I'm quite interested to know your take on cold. I know there's the whole Wim Hof, he's Dutch as well, isn't he, Wim Hof?
Oh, yeah.
The whole Wim Hof method. So when you say cold, do you mean cold showers, or what do you mean by that?
Exposure to cold, cold room, cold house, washing your face with cold water, taking cold showers. But of course, like you need to work your way up to it. What I do is every single morning, I wash my face with ice cold water. It's much better than drinking like 10 cups of coffee. It will wake you up. If you take cold showers, that's even better. But sometimes I do it. Sometimes I usually don't. What happens with cold is that it's like, it's a shock for your body. It's something unexpected. It's something, that puts your body in the defensive. Like it's uncomfortable. But when you do it, because it's in your control, like somebody's not hosing you down, like you're washing your own face, it's in your control. It becomes very empowering to like control how much of it you're going to take and how much of it you're going to resist. And also over time, you can really like go through that initial reaction of, oh my God, this is cold, this is uncomfortable, and I don't want it, make it stop, to being like, oh wow, like this is interesting. This is such an intense feeling. Let me see what's happening with my body. Like once you kind of like lean into it, once you step into it, take deep breaths and just taking that cold and being like, okay, I'm not going to say this is horrible. I'm not going to say this is amazing either. It's just a sensation. Like it's just my body feeling cold. It could be feeling hot. It could be feeling neutral. Wow. Like, let me explore this a little bit. Of course, you're not going to do this for like half an hour, but even in those like 20 seconds under the cold water, it's like a really amazing way of expanding your body, expanding your mind, and also like teaching your body that it's okay. If I'm there for the pain, if I'm there for discomfort, I don't get more hurt. I get less hurt because I'm not resisting. I'm not trying to make it warm. I'm not trying to run away. I'm like, okay, this is cold. It sucks, but it's okay. I'm choosing to be here and it's waking me up. It's energizing me. Wonderful. So it can be used in that way. But also there's a lot of research that shows it's good for vagus nerve stimulation, cold exposure, which puts us back into like a homeostasis, into a balance. So, really interesting stuff. But you need to work your way up to it. I mean,
yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really good concept called "eat the frog." You might have heard of it.
Oh,
Eat
yeah,
the frog.
yeah.
Start the morning with something uncomfortable, something that causes self-induced discomfort.
Yeah.
And in that way you have a quick win, and then your body gets primed. If I can do something uncomfortable, then the rest of the day should follow easy. Or easier.
Yeah.
And there was good studies. I know there was a study done about testosterone levels, but that's quite weak. But there's another study done about cold, having a cold room, having it really cold, and how that affects already and get a deeper,
for sleep,
refreshing sleep. And sleep is so important.
Yeah, for sleep, it's really good. Like less than 18 degrees, 16, 17, 18 degrees.
Yeah, exactly.
Having your bedroom, it really helps. Like you go into a deeper sleep, or sleeping naked.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
These things, it really helps.
Yeah, because normally we sleep at 21 degrees, but having it 17 degrees, the study suggested you get a much deeper sleep. Sleeping in your boxes or whatever, it really does affect the quality of sleep. The other thing I wanted to talk about, you mentioned on your Instagram recently about legitimizing anger and not gaslighting yourself.
Yeah.
And you talked about that in the context of culture.
Yeah.
And parenting.
Yeah.
Perhaps our parents didn't have the access to the resources that we do.
Yeah.
But that still doesn't take away from the fact that things could have been better. Now, I know a lot of my clients are estranged from their parents. So either estranged, no contact, or estranged, low contact.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for those trying to re-establish connections with their parents after 20, 30 years perhaps of estrangement in the context of setting boundaries with perhaps the father might be elderly, mother might be elderly, especially now with COVID, life is so precarious. So what advice would you have for our listeners who are establishing or trying to re-establish severed bonds after many, many decades?
Yeah. You need to be careful with re-establishing those bonds, because if the other person, it can be your parent, it can be an ex, whatever, if the other person hasn't done the work, if the other person hasn't gained self-awareness, if the other person hasn't gained insight into their abusive behavior, then you cannot and you shouldn't go back into contact, because that's going to be self-destructive. They're going to do the same thing. You have no proof that they're going to act in a different way. It doesn't matter if it's been 200 years. It's all about how much we change. And usually, like what happens with parents is that they don't change because they don't do the work. The child does the work. You go to therapy, you follow all these accounts, you work on yourself, you meditate, blah, blah, blah. What do the parents do? Nothing. They are still convinced that their way 30 years ago, 40 years ago was the best way. And they don't take responsibility. They don't empathize. They don't listen. They don't allow your experience to enter into their experience and be like, oh, wow, like my child is complaining about something. Maybe I should listen. Maybe I should change myself. If there's no accountability, if there's no doing the work, I would be very careful with trying to go back into contact. But if there has been some kind of change, maybe you went to family therapy, maybe they went to their own therapy, maybe they did their own work somehow, I don't know. Then, of course, within very strict boundaries, like keeping yourself safe and keeping your needs intact, then you can go down that route. But it's a very sensitive subject. If you want to do it, I'm with you. If you don't want to do it, I'm also with you. Like there's no big answer that I can, look into my chart and give you. It's very personal. It's very unique, case by case basis. But usually it's not a good idea unless there has been some kind of repair or some kind of change, accountability, and empathy on the other part. Yeah.
I think that's very sensible, because therapies only gained traction and legitimacy amongst the masses and acceptance now with online CBT and on various forms of, schema, gestalt, various forms of psychotherapy online in the last 30 years, and definitely in the last 10 years. And parents' generation might not be privy to that. In fact, a lot of parents still brush issues under the carpet and don't really radically self-accept. So there's a huge disconnect there. Like you said, the child does the work, they have self-awareness, the parent is still there. And if anything, gets worse, because as they get older, dementia, stubbornness, so many things happen when the parent gets older. They start developing childish traits, selfishness. This happens a lot. A lot of my patients are quite elderly in the hospital, they're 70, 80. And just as the child was incontinent and selfish, these 80, 90-year-olds, it's just a circle of life, isn't it? So there has to be work, absolutely. And I think there's a book by Dr. Nicole, maybe it's called Do the Work. There's certainly a book by a famous psychologist.
How to Do the Work. It's from last year.
That's the one.
Yeah. How to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's important, we've got access to this, social media and books online, ebooks, for instance. So we can certainly accelerate our self-learning, our healing. And
absolutely,
he talks about CBT, trauma-focused therapy.
Yeah.
If someone is to spend time with you or any other practitioner,
mm-hmm.
are there any other kind of forms of therapy apart from psychotherapy? I know you mentioned schema, there's gestalt, there's trauma-focused therapy, CBT. Any other kind of therapy?
Yeah, I love talking about this, but I got to wrap it up. Just a couple of minutes. So there is the school, or like the generation of cognitive behavioral therapies, the dialectical behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. These are like the third wave of CBT, as they're called. They integrate more mindfulness, more mind-body methods into it. It's not just like talk. You also meditate. You also do stuff also schema therapy. You do like empty chair work and things like that, role playing, things like that. But the most important, like non-talk therapy you can do is somatic experiencing therapy or somatic therapies. Again, the work of Dr. Stephen Porges and Dr. Peter Levine. And they talk a lot about feeling doing stuff with the client, taking them back to like what was happening when they get traumatized, So for example, maybe they were bitten by a dog and they couldn't run away. That's why they're traumatized. So in the session, in the therapy room, you make them just shake their legs or sprint a little bit, things like that, just bodily work, somatic work, rather than just talking. So they can do this like somatic experiencing or integrative somatic therapy. Really interesting stuff. They can explore those too, and they work really well because they help you discharge this like a trapped nervous energy from your body. So, yeah.
And it's about feeling that, and there's like immersion therapy, graded exposure therapy, and lots of things to. I could speak to you for hours, literally.
I know, me too.
Me
too.
We have to wrap up.
But I gotta go. Yeah.
Find you.
So the biggest one is Instagram, Accept and Act, at Accept and Act on Instagram. They can come find me. I also have a Patreon where people can sign up for 11 euros and just gain access to extra content, extra articles, extra work by me, or also to support my work and to ensure its continuation. So I would say Instagram is the main thing. There will be a podcast coming. There will be a YouTube channel coming, but I'm just way too busy right now, with my clients and everything else. So it's taking a while, but it will happen. So Instagram is where they can find me, the main channel. Yeah.
Right. Look forward to it. And with the YouTube channel, hit me up with any questions.
Yeah, we will collaborate for sure.
Anything here for you.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. Really appreciate it.
Same here.
Thank you so much, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, thank you for your time too, and take care.